Welcome to the Olive Shoots Family Podcast, where we talk about family and parenting, homesteading, and the things God is leading us towards. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Brittany. We've been married for 3 years, have one little boy, and just got our first piece of land where we plan to build and start our homestead. We are passionate about the family unit and getting back to the basics of the way God created us to live. We have big dreams and are learning what it looks like to pursue those dreams while first trusting God's leading.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. We've had kind of a crazy last couple of nights, and so this episode may be a little bit shorter than what we're used to. Like last night, we started recording, and we were recording late and realized that our shower was flooding, and so we had to go clear the pipes at like 10:30, 10:45 at night, and I almost got sprayed by a skunk, but that's a different story for another night. But I just wanted to talk about this idea that I've been thinking about, that when we think about theology, I think theology can sometimes be a scary term, a scary word for a lot of people, because when you think about theology, a lot of the times you think of like big, thick books about the Bible, like commentaries or Bible dictionaries, or maybe like ancient languages like Greek or Hebrew, or you think of like these doctrines and big words, like systematic theology or other biblical terms that you've heard before, and that is absolutely a part of what theology is. But at its core, theology, it can be broken down into two words, which is theos, which is God, and that phrase ology, which is a part of a whole bunch of words that we know of: biology, zoology, right? All of these words that are talking about the study of something. Biology, the study of life, or bios. And so when we think about theology, we're talking about the study of God, or maybe in other words, what we think about God, or the study of God. And when we put it in that terms, like, everyone has a theology. Every single person alive has a theology. Even the atheist who says that God is not real, does not exist, has a theology about who God is, which is a non-existent being. And so even the atheist has a theology. And so when we put that in context of, we are raising little humans who are going to grow up and become bigger humans, and one day have a mind of their own and think for themselves, and as their parents, we're trying to teach them about how the world works, and on a practical level, teach them how to ask for things nicely, how to help in the kitchen, how to clean up their room, how to drive a car, all these different things that we want to practically teach our kids. We're also trying to teach them their character and develop their character and their personalities and who we want them to be in light of who God is calling them to be. Things of like, hey, when you shake someone's hand, look them in the eye. When you ask something, say, please. When you say yes or no, say yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, right? Things like that are building their character and teaching them how to function, not just practically, but also in building their character into the people that we want them to be in society. But then we get to this deeper sense of teaching them and guiding them to be who God has called them to be. And at the heart of that is theology. At the heart of calling out the things that God is doing in their life is theology. And so how do we instill a theology about who God is to our children? I think it can happen in a lot of different ways, but I've just been thinking about this a lot lately. And for us, for our 18-month-old, almost 19-month-old,
He's 19 months old now.
He's 19 months old officially. One of the things that we've been doing is just being intentional about the books that we read to him, and the phrases that we say to him. And so I think we're pretty aware that right now he doesn't fully comprehend what we're saying to him. But he's getting it in little bits and pieces. And so we just bought a few board books and we're gifted some board books from our registry that are just all about the biblical text and teaching them things at the same time. And so as we're teaching him colors, the colors are based off of Bible passages. And as we're teaching him about the Garden of Eden and life in the Garden of Eden, we're teaching him about seeds and sunlight and soil, and all these different things. And then the music that we expose him to is old hymns that are turned into a new fun way that he can do his silly dancing and clap and sing and be crazy. But all of those things are teaching him a theology about who God is in the way that he loves to experience it the most. I think about like when he's dancing and screaming deep and wide, doing the motions, and
that's all he says over and over.
Over and over again.
Deep, wide.
And does the hand motions with them, and sometimes they're right. But when he's saying those things, the only words that he can say right now are deep and wide. But at the heart of that, he's beginning to put together that God's love is deeper than any other love in the world, and it is wider, more widespread than any other love in the world. And he doesn't quite realize that yet, but we're building the foundation now with him where he's at by just exposing him to these very intentional ways of building upon the theology of God. And so I think as parents, one of our responsibilities in teaching our kids about theology is doing it in ways that they can understand what's going on. And so for your 10-year-old, they may be able to have deeper conversations than we're able to have with Emerson right now. I hope so. But also your 16-year-old is going to be able to comprehend things at a much deeper level than a 10-year-old. And being able to have those intentional conversations, building a foundation about who God is in a context that matters to them is really cool. When I was a family pastor, one of the things I considered and thought about when I was thinking about like curriculum and developing curriculum and things like that was viewing it from the perspective of every single school year. So like I was in charge of birth until graduation, and some after that, but mainly focused on birth through graduation. And so from birth until they're 1 year old, what are the things that we want to instill in a 0 to 1 year old that year? What are the things we want them to know by the end of the year? What about 1 to 2? What do we want them to know by the end of the year? What about a kindergartner? What do we want them to know at the end of the year? Or a 7th grader or a senior, right? And so viewing it from that perspective of we have a year, and a year from now we want them to know this. And so as parents, if we if we take that same approach of like, okay, Emerson is a 1.5 years old now. What do we want him to know by year 2? And what do we want him to know by year 10? And what do we want him to know by the time he leaves our house? And start working backwards on those things. And I think that will be simple truths and basic truths when they're little. For a 0 to 1 year old, all they need to know is mommy and daddy love you, and we're going to take care of you. And maybe 1 to 2, it's mommy and daddy love you, and even though we don't give you everything that you want, we still love you, and Jesus loves you more than we do. And I don't know what that is for you individually, but having that perspective of, I have 18 years, 19 if we're lucky, and there are things that we can be building on every year. There's a theology we can be developing in our children and teaching them year by year, building the foundational blocks, so that when our children leave our home, they have a foundation of who God is and what He's like. They have a belief or an idea or a thought on God and on who God is. And I think it becomes even more important as your children get older. One of the pastors that I really love, his name is John Tyson, and he wrote a book called Intentional Father. I've probably talked about it multiple podcasts. If not, I've definitely told all of my friends about it, and encourage you to read that book if you haven't already. It's an amazing book, and it changed my life, and it changed my perspective on parenting. But in that book, and he also has a series that he does called The Primal Path. That's really cool too. But one of the things that he kind of teaches on is the raising of sons to be men, the raising of boys to be men. And he goes through this approach of how to raise your boys. And it's not specifics. It's not do X, Y, and Z, and then your boys will become men. But rather, it's as fathers, you know the heart of your children. And so you know what makes them tick. You know what makes them, gives them joy, brings them energy, excites them. You know those kind of things if you're a father that pays attention and that is intentional with your kids, and especially with your sons. And so as fathers, he encourages dads to not only pay attention to those things, but also to go out and develop a personalized curriculum almost for your sons. And so from the moment that they begin their journey of manhood starts like this epic training from father to son. And year by year, you develop the skills and you develop the abilities and things that you want your son to know by the time they leave the house. At the same time, you're developing a deeper relationship with your son. And again, John Tyson is mainly focused on that father-son relationship, but this absolutely applies to both genders on both sides, for mom and dad, son and daughter. And one of the things that he does that's really cool, that he encourages, is to not only develop the skills that you want your kid to have, but also to challenge them in their faith and challenge them in their walk. And a lot of that comes from reading together, of listening to podcasts together, of doing things that are going to challenge their thoughts on who God is, challenge their theology. And I think if we are able to do that with our kids, if we're able to have conversations about, son, what do you think about the theology of sin, of how sin entered into the world, how we still have sin, how people around us sin, about sinners themselves? To be able to have a conversation with Emerson about those type of things when he is in the middle of feeling the temptation of sin. He has been in trouble before and has felt the weight of sin. He knows the guilt and shame that's associated with sin. And to then be able to take those things that he's experienced in his life as a teenager, and to then say, okay, now that you've experienced those things, in light of who God is, what changes? What do you think now because of who God is, because of what God has done in your life? What do you think about sinners around you because of what God has done and what Jesus has done on the cross? What do you think about grace and mercy in light of the sin around us? And to be able to have those challenging conversations, those deep conversations, I think will transform his life in the long run. But backing that up 15 years, it starts with little board books talking about the colors, talking about opposites, talking about Holy Week and what Jesus did leading up to Holy Week. It's those little things that build upon and build upon and build upon and build upon, so that on down the road we can have the conversations that are life-altering and truly matter. And they truly matter not just because we're giving our kids information, but we're helping them put on the glasses, the lens that they will see the world in. And that's what theology is all about. It's not just about these big words that we talk about in church sometimes. It's not about thick Bible books or original languages. It's about building a foundation of who God is and instilling that in our children. And I think if we can do that, if we can put the importance of discovering who God is, learning about him, forming opinions, forming thoughts about God and his character and his existence in our lives, then when we send our children out into the world, they will be more equipped and they will be more ready and they will be more able to go out and be world changers, to be powerful men and women sent out with a purpose because they already have the foundation of, this is who my God is and this is who I am because of it. I think that's a powerful thought. And so I just want to challenge you this week that if you're listening, what are some of the things that you need to be doing with your children? Or maybe not your children, maybe it's just with you and your spouse in your home, or maybe it's you and friends around you. But what can you be doing this week, thinking about, okay, this time next year, what do my kids need to know? What do me and my wife need to know? What do I need to tell my friends about? This time next year, how can I grow? How can I lead the people around me? And specifically in the context of our children, what does my child need to know by the end of this year? What can I be teaching them? Maybe for a little baby, it's teaching them about God's grace and God's love for them by the way that we handle their temper tantrums and we handle nighttime routines when they're not tired and all those sorts of things. For a teenager, maybe it's life skills and deep conversations about difficult biblical topics. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. Maybe they just need help cleaning up their room and need God's mercy and grace in their lives just as much as a little toddler. Whatever that is, how can we be teaching our kids what they need to know by the end of the year so that we can build that foundation and lead them to have a theology of who God is, how He loves us, and how He's with us? Hope this was helpful. Talk to you guys next week.